Good afternoon and welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for being here. Uh, I am Natalie MacLees. I'm the founder of Aardvark, which is an accessibility testing platform. And I do these live streams every other Wednesday afternoon on a whole variety of different accessibility topics. So if you're just learning about accessibility or want to dig into any of the nuances and finer points, these are a great place to come. You can watch with some other viewers, have a little chit chat, and learn something new, hopefully. So, full disclosure for today, I was at a conference last week, and between the flying there and back and being around people for 3 full days, I got sick. And my voice is not the best, so I apologize. I am trying to keep my face very close to the microphone, so hopefully you can hear me. And I had originally intended for this to be a very ambitious stream where I would have my my Windows laptop out and it also connected to the stream, and we would look at NVDA and JAWS and voiceover. But I'm not feeling my best today, and my brain is just not up to that. So we're gonna go with just voiceover today and keep things simple so that I'm not having to try to juggle multiple computers at the same time. So in a future stream, we can do that. I'll unleash all of the chaos. But for today, I've got some lozenges here, and I've got some tea that I'll be sipping throughout to try to keep my voice lasting. But thank you for being here today. So give me a second. I'm going to have a little bit of tea, and then we'll talk about ARIA Live regions. Okay, a secret thing to know about me is I actually really love throat comfort tea. I think it's delicious. No, it's supposed to be like medicine. All right. ARIA Live regions. So these are for announcing dynamic content that appears on a web page. So if we have a confirmation message, an error message, or any other kind of thing happening, a background process completes, anything like that, and we want to notify the user. The best way to go about doing that is to have an ARIA Live region on our page. And if you have tried them before and didn't have any luck in getting them to work, you're not alone. There are some tricks that you have to know. So we'll talk about those today and give you a chance to figure out what you may have been doing wrong. Or maybe you have one right now that doesn't work the way that you expected. And we'll go through debugging at the end of the session and how to figure out what's going wrong. All right. So this is part 2 of the ARIA series. So our previous live stream, we went over ARIA rules, states, and properties to understand the basics of how to put together custom ARIA components. And today we're talking about live regions. So another whole area of ARIA that you may or may not have worked with before. So these are specifically for handling the case where we have dynamic content that changes on the page without the page reloading, and we need to notify assistive technology users about it. So let's talk about who those users are for a second. They are, of course, screen reader users, but I would remind you that not all screen reader users are blind. So some people use a screen reader for various different reasons. Sometimes it's helpful for people with dyslexia or other reading disorders if they are able to hear the text at the same time they're reading it. Some people just get information better audibly rather than visually. Sometimes people are low vision and find it helpful to use a screen reader in tandem with a screen magnifier to get content on a page. So there's a variety of different reasons people would use screen readers. And Our main focus for the live regions is just ensuring that whatever that assistive technology is, that it gets notified so that the user knows that something changed on the page. We also have users who are blind who use a refreshable braille display. And we would want the same thing to happen with the refreshable braille display, that if there was some kind of important information or updated status that displayed on the screen, we would want to notify the user of the refreshable braille display. So there's a variety of different assistive technologies involved and different reasons that people might be using those assistive technologies. So I just wanted to remind everyone about that before we got started. So what we're going to talk about today, we have it right down here, what we're going to cover, what a live region actually is, and how assistive technology decides what and when to announce things. We're going to look at the ARIA-live values. We're going to look at, excuse me, the ARIA attributes that go along with ARIA-live that nobody really reads the spec for and doesn't really know anything about. But we're going to talk about those because that's where a lot of bugs come from. We're going to talk about our implicit live regions, and we're going to go through some live demos and look at some code, and we'll look at how to debug your live region if it's not working the way that you expected. So some basic knowledge of HTML and JavaScript is super helpful for today's session, but you don't need to have come to part 1 of ARIA because ARIA live regions is kind of its own little topic. But it's always good to go back and review those. So if you missed last week's live session, it's still up on everything. It's still on Facebook, it's still on LinkedIn, it's still on YouTube. Facebook is the only one that removes them after 30 days. I'm not really clear why, but even if Facebook takes it down, you can still get to it on YouTube or LinkedIn. All right, so let's we have all these demos that we're going to be taking a look at today, and some resources that I used while I was doing research for today, and then some key takeaways that we'll talk about a little bit later in the stream. So first up, let's go ahead and go to our basics tab and let's talk about what is it really? What is a live region really? So it is any part of a page that assistive technology has been told to watch for changes. And when the content inside that area changes, the screen reader or the refreshable braille display or some other assistive technology announces that change without the user having to navigate there. And we have 2 ways of creating one. And we're going to look at the first one is using the ARIA-live attribute on any element. And then we also have an implicit live region role, which we'll look at some samples later on today. Let me go ahead and turn on voiceover, and I have my speakers all the way up, so hopefully the voiceover voice will come through on the microphone, but let me know if you don't hear anything. So let me turn that on.
Voiceover on Chrome. Basics. ARIA Live Regions Demos Google Chrome. Natalie, AAArdvark Accessibility.
That's really loud, so I hope that you're able to hear that. That's way louder than I'm talking for sure. Okay. Although, you know, my mouth is right up against the mic. All right, so we have a demo here, and we have 2 buttons for announce a greeting and announce the time, and we're going to just give those a try. So I'm going to open the rotor.
Form controls menu. On item announce.
And I always say, if you're going to learn how to use a screen reader, the first thing you need to learn is how to make it stop talking. And for voiceover, that is hitting the control key. So if you want to interrupt it at any time, you just hit the control key on your keyboard and you will interrupt it, because it does tend to say a lot when you maybe don't necessarily want or need it to. So the rotor lets us navigate through the page by different types of content. Let me just flip through the different panels of the rotor real quick so you can get a sense for what's there.
Tables menu. Landmarks menu. Window spots menu. Links menu. Headings menu. Form controls menu. On item.
All right, so you can see it lets us skip around to different parts of the page. We could get all the links, all the headings. and all the form controls. So even though what we're dealing with right now is not a form, it's just a button is a form control. So it's included in the form controls menu. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter to skip to the announce greeting button.
Announce greeting button.
We'll just ask it to stop talking. It's going to tell us all about the button. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and activate that button.
Hello there. Nice to hear from you.
So you could hear that it's read the, okay, I think I turned it off so it won't read anything.
Hello there.
Nope.
Nice to.
All right. So let me actually turn voiceover off for a second.
Voiceover off.
Okay. So right here underneath the button, we see that there's a message that says, hello there, nice to hear from you. And when we click the button, we actually heard that message read out. So the other one is going to do a similar thing. It'll put a message here with the current time and it'll read it out. So let me start voiceover up again and I'll activate that second button.
Voiceover on. Form controls announce the time button. The time is now 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 27 seconds p.m.
Okay.
Voiceover off.
And then the last button here just clears that. So if I activate it, you can see it just wipes out that little message that displays under the buttons. So we didn't have to, as a user, I didn't have to go do anything to hear those messages. They were just read out to me because that is the purpose of an ARIA live region. So let's take a look at the markup that makes up that live region. I'm going to zoom in a little. That seems a little small. All right. So we just have a div with the property of ARIA live, and it's set to polite. And we'll talk about the different options that you have for that value. And then we're going to use a JavaScript so that when we click on the button, it's going to update the text that's inside that live region. Just the same way that you would if you were updating the text of anything else on the screen. There's no special way that you have to go about it. And that's it. That's all there is to creating a live region. And we'll dig into what might be going wrong if they're not working for you a little bit later, but we'll also talk about what our different options are. So things to notice, and this is where things might be going wrong for you. That region, right? So our div right here, our ARIA live equals polite, it's already in the DOM when the page loads. It's not being injected later. So if we scroll back up, it's just an empty blank area, but there is an empty div sitting there that we can't see. And all we're doing is changing its text content. So that's the first important thing to know. You don't inject a live region into the page later. It should be on the page at the time the DOM loads. And assistive technology is going to know to monitor the content of that live region and announce anytime the text changes. In this particular case, our live region is visible. So when I click this button, I don't have the screen reader on right now, but I can see that this message is here. And if I say announce the time, I can see that it now says the time is now 1:14. Now, you can have those visually hidden so that sighted users don't see anything, but screen reader or refreshable braille display or other assistive technology users will still get that message. That is an option for you. They don't have to be visible and they don't have to be hidden. They could be either one. And what's going to make the most sense is going to depend on the different use cases that you have. All right, so here's our 3 different politeness levels. So we have off, and this is when we don't want it to do announcements. So if we're doing something like a running timer that's changing every second, nobody wants to listen to that. To say 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. That is so annoying. So in that case, we would just turn it off. And users, if it was a DOM node that's still available on the page. Users can get to it if they want to know how many seconds are in there, but they don't need to listen or have that message sent to their Braille display every second, right? Telling them that the timer is clicking down. That's just annoying. So you could turn it off. You can also dynamically turn it off. So you could set it to off with JavaScript. If someone indicated that, okay, I don't want these announcements anymore, for example. We also have polite, which is what we've used in the example on this page. And that will happen when the user is idle. So I'm not a native screen reader user, so my voice on my screen reader is actually very slow. And when people who use screen readers every day watch my demos and things of me using a screen reader, they get very frustrated because they listen to the voice at like 500 speed, like 500%, and it's very fast because otherwise it does take a very long time to get through a page, right? So native screen reader users, just like anyone else, are quickly scanning through a page. They're trying to figure out what all is here, what can I do, what information is here, and we don't want to interrupt them. If they've specifically said, tell me the list of headings on this page, and we've got a little alert that comes up, to say, oh, your settings were saved, we don't want to interrupt them in the middle of that. So we'll use polite in that particular case. And that should be the case for most of the time. Like most of the time, you don't want to interrupt the user in what they're doing. So our third option for the politeness level is assertive. And that is going to interrupt the user. And this should only be for urgent messages that need their immediate attention. So if their session has timed out, if there's some kind of critical error in submitting a form, they've lost their connection. They're not connected to the internet anymore, right? So there's no point in continuing what they're doing. Those kinds of things we would want to interrupt to let them know. So default to polite and use assertive when it really makes sense that we want to interrupt the user for this particular case. All right, so that is our basic demo. Let's go ahead and look at the form validation demo. And with this, we're going to start looking at some of the other, implied live regions, the implicit live regions. So we're going to take a look at some of those. All right, so we've got a form validation error. I'm going to file up VoiceOver in just a second and demo these two forms with you. One of them, you can see the one on the left is broken. It doesn't have a live region. And the one on the right is fixed. And it has that role equals alert, which we'll talk about in a second. And it also has the message, the error message tied to the form field. So let me fire up VoiceOver and we'll just listen to these two different fields. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to submit the form without filling in the email address.
VoiceOver heading level 1, demo 1, form validation. Form controls menu, email address, required email. Sign up button. You are currently on.
Okay, so you see that I clicked that sign up button and a message popped up that said, please enter a valid email address that I can see, but we heard nothing in VoiceOver, right? We got no indication whatsoever that anything happened when we clicked that button. It was complete silence. So I could navigate backward and find that error message, and I'll do that now.
Please enter a valid email address. Your current email address, required email, 1Password menu is available.
I always forget to disable 1Password.
Email address, VoiceOver off.
All right, let me disable 1Password here. Let's see, manage extension, 1Password. Let's turn it off. It gets in the way when you're trying to do these demos. All right, so there we go. So you could hear that when I move the focus backward, if I focused on that actual error message, I could hear it read out. But when I went to the form field itself, I just heard email address. I didn't hear that there was any kind of problem with that form field. And I'll do that again. I'm going to fire up VoiceOver again. Sorry, I need another sip of tea here in a second. I'll fire up VoiceOver again. I'll try to submit that form again, and then I'll go submit the other one.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Form controls menu. On item email address required. Sign up button. You are currently on a button. To click this button, please enter a valid email address. Email address required. Email. You are currently on a text field. Form controls email address required menu pop-up. Email. You are currently on a text field. Sign up button. You are currently on a button. Please enter a valid email address. Please enter a valid email address. Email address. Please enter a valid email address. Required. Email. VoiceOver off.
Okay, give me a second to have some tea. All right. So you saw in the first form, when I hit the sign up button, I didn't hear anything. When I navigated backward through the form, I navigated to the error message. Of course, I heard the error message read out, but I would have to know that it was there to navigate to. And there was really no indication that that was there. And then even when I moved my cursor back to the email address field itself, I just heard that there was a text field called email address. I didn't get any notification that there was an error or any kind of problem. In the form on the right, the fixed form, as soon as I clicked the sign up button, I heard immediately, please enter a valid email address. So I understood immediately that there was a problem. I could do the same thing again, navigate backward. I could hear the error message read again, navigate back to the form field. And that time, when my focus ended on the form field, I could hear not just that it was an email address field sitting there waiting to be filled in, but that there was an error that needed to be addressed with that particular form field. So let's take a look at some markup for that. So on the broken field, we have no live region, and we also don't have any kind of programmatic tie between the error message and the form field itself. So you can see it's just a div with a class of error message, and it's hidden, and then we show it when there's an error message. In the one that's fixed, we used a role of alert on the div. So a div role of alert. The class has no impact on accessibility. We're just using that for CSS styling. And again, it was hidden by default. And we just show it when content shows up there. And the JavaScript is the same in both versions. It just set the text content and removed the hidden attribute. And we also have an aria described by attribute in the working example that ties that error message to the form field just with an ID. So an ID, aria described by ID, and then this has an ID. So here's the thing that people often, the mistake that often gets made is that we create the container once. It has to be on the page when the DOM renders. Now, I can't tell you that 100% of the time in 100% of different screen reader and browser variations, that if you dynamically add a aria-live region to the page after the DOM is rendered, that it's never going to work. It does work occasionally in some different browser combinations under some circumstances, but it definitely does not work anywhere near 100% of the time. So you need to have that on the page at the very beginning. And it's fine if it's empty, it's fine if it's hidden, but it has to be on the page so that as the DOM renders, the assistive technology can pick up that it's there and can monitor it for changes. The way that the assistive technologies work is that they don't always update as pages update. They're a little bit behind the web, right? We've been doing dynamic updates on web pages for well over a decade now. That's been a very common thing to do. But the assistive technologies don't always keep up with that. All right, so you may have noticed that here I didn't use an ARIA-live region. I used an ARIA role alert. And let's talk about these because these are our implicit live regions. This is the second way that we can create live regions on a page. And in this case, the user is trying to submit a form and there's an error. And that is a very important message that we want to make sure that we communicate to the user. So this is a case where if I were using ARIA-live, I would go ahead and use assertive instead of polite. In this case, however, I used a role of alert. And let's look at what these 4 implicit live regions are. An alert is the first one here. So it's the same as saying ARIA-live equals assertive. It behaves the same way. And again, that's critical errors and emergencies because it is going to interrupt the user from what they're doing. We're going to skip over this aria-atomic right now. We're going to talk about those attributes in a minute. All right. The other thing that we have is a role equals status. And this is the same behavior as setting ARIA-live to polite and again, aria-atomic to true. And these are all the other kinds of information that might come back. A process finished, search results showed, a little message showed when we clicked a button. If the user's gone off and started doing something else, we don't want to interrupt them. These are just informational. So that's what role status is for. We could also use a log, which is the same as ARIA-live equals polite, but this one is actually meant to be like, I want to keep track of an ongoing situation, basically. So for the example here is a chat message or an activity feed where I've got some content and we're going to keep adding to it. And it's a log of some kind of activity, whether that's messages sent back and forth, different things happening on a page. We're just keeping track. And so that's what we'd want to use the role log for. And then we also could have a timer. And usually those are silent. So we'd want to pair it with ARIA-live equals off because, there's going to be exceptions to every rule. There would be times when we would want people to hear a second countdown. And that would be important to make sure that happened. But most of the time, that's just annoying information, especially if you're trying to read an article and something keeps interrupting you to count down on a timer or announce a new time on a timer. So usually we would want that to be silent. So the implicit rules are more consistent cross-browser than just using ARIA-live. So most of the time, you're going to actually want to reach for those and use either a role alert or role status. Those are way more common than log and timer, which are for more specialized situations. So you're going to use alert and status more often than not. All right, let's go ahead to our next example here. And this is a search as you type, which is a very common thing. We see this on websites everywhere. And it doesn't get implemented correctly very often. So let's take a look at what we could do right and wrong. So in the broken example, on the left, we basically have an ARIA-live region for the search results. And so every time that search results list changes, it's going to get announced. So let me turn on voiceover and we'll try doing a search for ARIA in that search field, and we'll see what that sounds like. I'm going to do it twice. I'm going to do it once, typing ARIA slowly, and I'm going to do it a second time, typing ARIA quickly, provided my fingers will cooperate. All right, let's give it a try.
Voiceover heading level. Form controls menu. Search articles. Try ARIA. Focus. A. Getting started with ARIA. Understanding ARIA-live regions. Focus management for single Page apps accessible form validation patterns. The accessible are getting started with ARIA, understanding ARIA-live regions, keyboard navigation for menus, ARIA authoring practices, tabs, form labels versus ARIA label when not to use ARIA roles. A. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type ARIA. A. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type voiceover off.
Okay, so if you were trying to find some certain article on a page, would that be helpful to you to hear that whole list of articles that matched every time you typed a letter or a word? But that's how a lot of them get implemented. As they just say, like, oh, well, this list is going to change, so let's just make that the ARIA Live region. So let's look at the one that's a little bit of a better experience and see what happens when we use that one. And again, I'll do it twice, once typing slowly and once typing quickly.
Voiceover on Chrome. Form controls menu. Search articles, try ARIA, focus, form, search text field. A. 25 results for A. R. 11 results for R. I. 7 results for ARI. A. 7 results for ARIA. ARIA selected. ARIA. You are currently on A. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type voiceover off.
All right, so overall, that time when we typed, we could hear the search results getting narrowed down, right? When we just typed the letter A, we heard there was 25 matches. We typed R, it narrowed down to, what was it, 17, I think, next, and then down to 11, etc. We didn't hear what they all were because we could navigate to those ourselves, and I can open that up again and show you how to do that. But I heard what was changing on the page, right? Like, I got a sense for what's happening. Oh, I'm searching, and there's this many results, these kind of live results coming back. And I can get a feel for, oh, well, I'm down to 11. That's good enough. Let me look through what the 11 are. Or maybe I want less than that. Like maybe I want to keep typing and find even less. So let me open it up again and show you how I would get to the search results with VoiceOver.
VoiceOver. 7 results for ARIA. List 7 items. You are currently in a list. Getting started with ARIA, 1 of 7. Understanding ARIA live regions, 2 of 7. ARIA authoring practices, tabs, 3. VoiceOver off.
Okay, I won't make you listen to the whole rest of the list, but you can see that it is marked up as a list, which means that assistive technology is going to pick that up and understand, hey, there's a list of 7 things that all go together, and it's going to tell me 1 of 7, 2 of 7, 3 of 7. So it makes it really easy to navigate through that list and understand. If I can't see the screen, right, I can still understand what content is there on the screen and how many options I have and how many different choices I have. And I can hear which one I'm on to activate it. Now, in this case, this is just a demo, so those don't actually go anywhere, right? But presumably, if this was a real live search, those would actually be links that would take you off to other pages. But I could very easily figure out which one I wanted to go to. And I know exactly what's happening as I type. I understand that a search is happening and some results are coming back. With the one on the left, the one that was broken, where just the whole search results area was the live region, right? Just hearing that read out, that's just this wall of text. It wasn't marked up as a list. It's just a bunch of text that's getting read out to me. I can't tell one item from another. It's very confusing, but that is how that gets implemented on a lot of websites. So start firing up your screen reader and testing it on when you come across these live searches. Test them out. They are broken more often than they actually work. All right, so 2 big lessons from this demo. So the element that is your ARIA live region doesn't have to be the one that users see. So I think that's what happens when we see things like this on the left, where they're just going to say, oh, well, there's going to be this search results area and it's going to update as users type. So we'll just make that the ARIA Live region because then that will get announced to people. But that's actually not that helpful. And the one on the right, you can actually see in this particular case, we don't have a visible, there are X number of results from this search. It's not actually visible here. In this case, I don't think it would hurt anything if that was visible. I think that's a nice thing to show for all users. But just as an example, it can be visually hidden and still be announcing things for assistive technology. So that's why this demo used that particular example. And then the other thing was with the debouncing, right? Since we're doing that on typing, we don't want to announce, we don't want to have an announcement firing off every single keystroke, right? So you want to have a little bit of a pause in there in your JavaScript and debounce that event listener so that we're only firing off that search and then also firing off that ARIA Live announcement when the user has paused typing, even for a very short amount of time, right? Like 300 to 500 milliseconds, less than a second. If they pause, let's go ahead and do the announcement then and not do it when they're in the middle of typing a big long word and be interrupting them. Okay, so our code. So this is what it looks like. We have a div. It has an ID of status. So that we could be using to tie that programmatically to the form field. But that would be the only use for accessibility wise. We gave it a role of status, right? Instead of an ARIA Live polite, we gave it a role of status, and it has a class of SR only, which the only reason that is there is for us to be able to make this visually hidden. And our search results does not have ARIA Live on it. In the good example, we don't have ARIA Live on the actual search results because that's not the thing that we want read out every time changes happen. And then here's our debounce so that we're waiting 400 milliseconds. We're waiting for the user to stop typing for 400 milliseconds before we fire all this stuff off, right? And then this is an example of what a visually hidden CSS looks like. This is not the only way to do it. There are many others. If you search the web for visually hidden CSS, you will see many different types and many different ways of approaching it. But the point is that we want to hide content visually, but we can't use display none and we can't use visibility hidden. And the reason that we can't use those two things is because those two CSS attributes in particular hide content for all users. So if it's display none, it won't get read out for screen readers either. Right? We won't see it on the screen, but it's also not still available for assistive technology. So in cases where we do want to have messages that are read out just for assistive technology purposes, we want to use a different method of hiding them. And this one is a really common one that just absolutely positions it and uses a clip path to hide things away. And then some of the other style attributes that we see used there are just for taking care of different quirks and things that happen in different browsers. So you don't have to use that one exactly. There's lots of people with lots of opinions on exactly what visually hidden CSS should look like. But just know you cannot rely on display none or visibility hidden for that particular case. All right, let's go ahead and look at the toast example. And you may know this also as a snack bar, right? And we have a couple of different ways that people do these. So let me fire up VoiceOver and I'll go through, I'll click both examples and we'll get a sense for kind of how those work. And I just see that I got a message. Actually, I found out I can do a new fancy thing. Watch this. I could show the message I'm talking about. So, Hello, Anisha. I hope I said your name correctly. Hello, welcome. I'm glad that you could join us. All right. So let me go ahead and fire up VoiceOver, and I will click both of these buttons for adding to cart, and we'll see what happens with the screen reader.
VoiceOver. Form controls add to cart button. Item added to cart. Form controls add to cart button. You are currently item added to cart. VoiceOver off.
Okay. I don't think my example was actually very effective because I didn't go start trying to do something else immediately. But so we basically, the one on the left has a role of alert on the toast, and adding something to cart is not a catastrophic error that we need to make the user aware of all the time. So that's probably too aggressive for that particular case. We want to have a role of status, and then make sure that we have that pre-rendered region. So here's what we have. Role equals alert is equal to aria-live assertive and aria-atomic true. We'll get to the aria-atomic in just a minute. And then role of status is equal to behaves roughly the same way as polite. It waits for the user to be idle and then announces the whole region. So we don't necessarily want to interrupt the user if they were trying to do something else at the time, although I guess my example isn't the best example. You're probably not trying to do something else if you're putting something in the cart. So anyway, this is just a general rule for you to kind of try to keep in mind. So this is something that we talked about a little bit earlier. You don't want to try to dynamically create the role of status with the text already in it and append it to the DOM, because what the assistive technology is looking for is for the content of that live region to change. And if you create that live region in JavaScript and append it to the DOM with the text already in it, nothing has changed. It's been the same the whole time. And so it won't always necessarily get announced the way that you would expect. So ideally, you would have a role, your live region on the page already, on page load, and just hidden. And then you can make it visible and put it on the page and make it look however you want and change the content in it when it's time to make the announcement. And one thing that you can do, if you have an app with lots of stuff happening, lots of stuff is going on, we need to communicate lots of different asynchronous statuses to our users. An option that you have, and this is from Sarah Swaydon, and I have a link to the page where she talked about this, is to just have one role status that's on your page on load, right? So it's in your DOM as soon as the page loads. And then anytime anything anywhere on the page has to do an announcement, we just use that one to put whatever the announcement is. And then we could have the user clear it out manually, or we could wait a certain amount of time and clear it out, or we could just leave it there until the next time we have to announce something and change it. So it's the actual changing of the content that triggers the announcement by assistive technology. So if we put a message in there, oh, your settings were saved, and then we just leave that text in there, nothing else is going to happen. No other announcements are going to be made. The only time another announcement would be made is if we changed that text again and said, oh, now you added something to your cart. Then we would get another announcement. So it's also perfectly fine to leave the text in there until we have the next message to put in there. So this could be this could be especially helpful, I think, for single page apps. So if you're building something in Vue or React or whatever, this can be a helpful strategy to help you kind of keep control of your ARIA live regions and make sure that they're working as expected for your users. All right. Last example that I have for you today is a cart badge count. So we have a little number, and here's where we're going to finally learn about that aria-atomic that we've been seeing mentioned all along and figure out what that means, and some other aria properties as well. All right, so I'm going to open up VoiceOver, and we'll try adding and removing some items from the broken cart on the left. And then I'll try adding and removing some broken or some items from the working cart on the right. So go ahead and listen to the differences between those two different things. And we'll talk about it after I'm done.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Form controls menu. Add item button. You are current. 1. 2. Remove item button. You are currently on a button. 0. Add item button. 1. 2. 3. Remove item. 2. 1. Form controls menu. Add item button. You are currently on a card. Items 1. Card. Items 2. Card. Items 3. Remove item. Card. Items 2. Card. Items 1. Add item button. Card. Items 2. Card. Items 3. VoiceOver off.
All right, so as I was using the broken cart that's on the left, as I clicked the add and remove items buttons, the only thing that we heard read out for the ARIA Live region was a number. So it just said 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. And I didn't really get any context for what that might mean. My button didn't explicitly say add an item to a cart or remove an item from a cart. So it was a little bit confusing to try to figure out what those numbers may have meant. But you heard when I worked the buttons on the right-hand side on the fixed cart that we heard cart items too. So I was hearing the number of items that were in the cart, but I was also hearing that in context, that we're talking about a cart and we're talking about how many items are in it. And I heard that going, items 2, items 3, items 2, items 1, as I added and removed items from the cart. So I had context for what that change was actually doing and not just the number. And this is where people get tripped up with aria-atomic. So let's talk about this first. So in the fixed example, we had first a hidden role status region, right? Because we don't actually see the word items here in our cart, but we heard it read out by the screen reader. So in this case, we actually had a hidden ARIA Live region that was reading out that extra context. So cart updated with 3 items. And we did see visually the badge number changing, but we could hear it, and we could hear it in context and understand that it was the number of items in a cart. And this is our, okay, let's talk about this one really quick first before I go back down and start talking about aria-atomic again. So fix A would be to use aria-atomic plus an inline label. So that's a perfectly valid fix. And fix B is what I did in this example, which was to use a separate status region. So there's no, like almost everything else in accessibility, like almost everything else in web development in general, right? There's never one single correct way of doing something. There's always more than one way of doing it, and then trade-offs, which way might be better or worse. And the answer to everything is always it depends. So we do have 2 different ways that we could have tackled that. Each of them is perfectly fine. All right. So aria live polite on an element doesn't give it its meaning, right? So 3, just saying 3, 2, 1 didn't really tell us what was going on there. So let's look at these modifier attributes and learn about what aria-atomic means. So aria-atomic, our possible values are true and false. And you notice that the default is false. And this is true when we're just saying aria-live, and then we say separately aria-atomic. So when this is false, which is the default, only part of the text that changed is announced. So even if I had a little cart that had the text cart with one item, but the only thing I changed was the number, if aria-atomic is set to false, which is the default value, I'm only going to hear the number. And sometimes that might be preferable. Sometimes that might be what you want. But most of the time, that is going to leave out any context around that thing that's changing. So when it's true, we hear the entire region announced every time the aria-live region changes. So keep that in mind. And then also keep in mind that when we use role status or role alert, the aria-atomic is set to true for us automatically. We don't have to do it ourselves separately. So we only have to worry about that if we don't want the default value or if we're using aria-live attribute instead of using one of those role attributes. All right, we've got a couple of other ones that you may have stumbled across out in the wild, which is aria-relevant, which is going to tell assistive technology what kinds of changes are the relevant ones that should be announced. And you can see that our options are additions, removals, text, or all. And the default is additions and text. So maybe if I'm taking things out, I don't want it announced. Maybe if I'm adding things, I don't want it announced. Maybe I only want it announced if I'm removing things. So you do have control over that, like pretty fine-grained control over what kinds of changes actually get announced to users. And I would love to tell you that that worked reliably across all different browsers and assistive technologies, but the fact is it doesn't. So if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you might need to use that, definitely do some research, and you might want to rethink your user experience a little bit so that you don't have to rely on that. And think if there is a different approach that you could take to what you're trying to do. And then we have aria-busy, which I feel like I've definitely seen that one out in the wild, which again is true, false, and it defaults to false, which is basically going to give us a way if we're making 5 or 6 changes in a row. We're running through a big long JavaScript and it's going to be adding 5 things maybe to an aria-live region. And we don't want it reading those out one by one as they happen. We just want one big announcement at the end. That's what we can use aria-busy for. So if we set aria-busy to true, we can make a whole bunch of little changes and then set it back to false. And now we get one bulk update instead of all of those little piecemeal updates getting read out separately, individually. And again, browser and assistive technology support, definitely do your research, do lots of testing, and make sure that it's working the way that you expect for your users. All right, let's talk about, we've got a few minutes left, so we'll talk about debugging. So if you have tried to use an aria-live region and it didn't announce anything, here are some of the common reasons why that may have happened. So we basically have a 4-point checklist here, and we'll go through each of these 4 things and talk about them real quick. All right, so our first reason is that the region didn't exist before the content did. So we've talked about this already today. Your aria-live region has to be in the DOM when it first loads and not added later. And like I said, it's not that no browsers and assistive technologies will announce a dynamically added live region. It's just that it doesn't work reliably. So let me fire up VoiceOver and we'll try these 2 examples.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Form controls menu. Announce something button. You are.
Nothing heard from that one. Let's try the other one.
Form controls menu. Announce something button. You are current. Announcement at 1 hour, 54 minutes and 39 seconds PM. Voiceover off.
Okay. So the only difference between those two examples is that I dynamically injected the div with the role of status into the DOM in the left broken example, and it was already on the page, and I just changed the text inside of it in the right-hand example. Okay, so the first thing to check is your region already on the page when the DOM loads? The second reason is the content changed too quickly. So you often have to put a little throttle in your JavaScript, a little timeout in there to make sure that we're not getting too many things happening all at the same time. So let me fire up VoiceOver and we'll listen to these happen.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Debugging. Form controls rapid fire updates. But update 10 of 10. Form controls rapid fire updates button. You are currently done. 10 updates complete. VoiceOver off. All right. So you can see that we didn't even get to hear what those were because we just heard as it tried to go through 10 updates. And then on this side, we heard it when it was done. So done, 10 updates complete. So that's another example of where you might want to use the aria-busy attribute. But you can also debounce those messages that are going out because aria-busy doesn't have the best support. So you can use your JavaScript to debounce those announcements. The third reason that you may not have heard anything is that your element was hidden when the change happened. And by hidden, I mean hidden with display none or visibility hidden, not just visually hidden using that JavaScript that's just going to clip it and absolutely position it. So if it is display none or visibility hidden, it will not get read out because that hides content from all users. So it's visually hidden, but it's also hidden for any kind of assistive technology users. So let me open it up and I'll try both of these buttons here. VoiceOver, form controls menu. On item and announce something button. Nothing. Let me click it again. No, nothing. Okay, let me go to the one on the right. Form controls menu, announce something button. Announcement at 1 hour, 57 minutes, and 31 seconds PM. VoiceOver off. Now, you probably noticed that that announcement that we just heard is not visually visible on the screen. So that's what I mean. It's visually hidden, but it's not hidden, right? So it's using that screen reader only or that SR only CSS class that we looked at a couple of pages ago. So not fully hidden for everybody on the page. All right. And then we have this last one, which I think trips people up sometimes, which is that the text didn't actually change. So if I'm announcing the same thing multiple times, like your settings were saved, the text doesn't actually change. So we won't actually hear anything announced. So we actually have to do some extra work if we think we're going to have the same announcement in the same ARIA-live region more than once. So let me open up VoiceOver and trigger both of these two messages, and then we'll talk about what happened. VoiceOver, form controls and set message button. Your changes have been saved. Okay, so on the first click, I hear the announcement read out, your changes have been saved. But if I save them again, nothing. I don't hear anything read out. And that's because even though the JavaScript technically ran that said update the text inside this ARIA-live region, the before and after text is identical. So there wasn't any change for the assistive technology to pick up. So let me go to the other button now. Form controls set message button. Your changes have been saved. Okay, so first time that gets triggered, I hear the message read out. Let me do it again. Your changes have been saved. And we hear it the second time.
let's talk about what has to happen in the JavaScript for that to work.
Voiceover off.
So we actually have to wipe out the content of our ARIA-live region to set it to nothing. And I think actually I had to set it to a non-breaking space because I was having some trouble actually getting this to work. This was a little bit tricky. And then I had to set a timeout, and I had to get the timeout up to 200 milliseconds before it would work. And then I put the message back again. Your changes have been saved. And then it would announce out, because that gave the assistive technology time to recognize that the message had changed. So it changed to nothing, so no announcement, but then it changed back to your changes have been saved. My voice is definitely getting very tired, so thank you for sticking with me. Okay, so JavaScript people, be on board with me here. So live regions are an observer on a piece of the DOM for assistive technology. And for that observer to trigger, the observed region must exist before the observation starts. The change has to be big enough to notice and slow enough to stay. So if I just flash a real quick message in a live region for 50 milliseconds, it's probably not going to get announced out by most assistive technology. We need it to be there long enough that the assistive technology can pick it up. The region has to be accessible, so it cannot be hidden from the accessibility tree, right? Cannot use display none, cannot use visibility hidden. And a change to the text has to be an actual change. So if you have a situation like that last one we just looked at, where you might want to have the exact same announcement go more than once, you need to make sure to wipe out the content to nothing to a non-breaking space, because nothing actually didn't work. I was having trouble getting that to work, and that could be a voiceover only quirk, but I didn't have time to test it on more screen readers. And then I had to wait 200 milliseconds and then change it back to the message that I wanted to announce before it would work again. So keep all of those things in mind if you're struggling with ARIA live regions and they're not working the way that you expected them to. All right, so that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being here. Just a reminder, I'm Natalie MacLees. I'm founder of AAArdvark, an accessibility testing platform. I do live streams on assorted different accessibility, not just technology, but very specifically accessibility, web accessibility, every other Wednesday at this exact same time. And we are in the middle of an ARIA series. So this was part 2, ARIA live regions. Part 1 is still live on, it is still up on Facebook. It is on YouTube. It is on LinkedIn, where we went over roles, states, and properties. And we'll be digging into another ARIA topic 2 weeks from today. I hope you can come back and join me. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I hope you feel better than I do. I hope I'm no longer sick the next time. And I hope you can join me. Thank you so much and have a good week.